Distinguished participants, welcome. I'm Dimitra Koulouri, Senior VAT Policy Advisor at the OECD's Center for Tax Policy and Administration. And today I have the honor and pleasure of moderating this session that will explore worldwide progress in the adoption of VAT on e-commerce reforms among developing economies. So this session will discuss the opportunities of technical assistance offered by the OECD as well as its partner organizations. And it will hear from countries, from developing economies, on their experiences with implementing these reforms in their efforts actually to ensure that VAT is effectively collected on online sales. It will finally explore new initiatives to assist the tax administrations in tackling VAT fraud and non-compliance in e-commerce. This session will greatly benefit from the insights and experiences of a panel of distinguished speakers representing developing economies, including Botswana, Jamaica, South Africa, and Georgia, but also from insights from a representative from the World Bank. So with that, I would suggest that we kick off with an OECD presentation to set the scene for this session and to inform our discussions. So VAT is well known that it is a major revenue source for governments worldwide, with over 170 countries operating a VAT now. Particularly in developing economies, VAT often accounts for over 25%, sometimes even 30% of total tax revenues. It goes without saying that safeguarding these crucially important VAT revenues is, of course, of major importance to generate revenues necessarily to finance sustainable development and to strengthen domestic resource mobilization. So countries, especially developing economies that are in the process of actually safeguarding these revenues, are faced with the challenge of a continuing exponential growth of online sales, especially to private consumers from online sellers that are not in the same jurisdictions as the consumers. And that creates significant issues because traditional VAT rules and collection mechanisms lack effectiveness to collect VAT where the vendor is not physically present in the jurisdiction of customers. And this, of course, leads to low or inappropriately low amounts of VAT being levied. It is obvious that in the absence of VAT reforms to address these challenges, digital growth creates issues and causes both VAT revenue losses, but also an unfair competitive pressure on domestic businesses. So for over 2 decades now, the OECD plays an essential leadership role in fostering inclusive global dialogue on VAT policy and administration issues. It assists countries, interested countries, to secure these appropriate taxation outcomes through the development of internationally agreed standards and effective mechanisms for their implementation. So in this context, and in response to a call from countries all over the globe to find a globally coordinated solution to address the challenges of collecting VAT on international digital trade, the OECD has delivered a set of internationally agreed standards and recommended approaches. I think it is very important to highlight that these standards recommended approaches have been developed in a truly inclusive manner. The OECD has put together the OECD Global Forum on VAT that brings together officials from all countries that operate a VAT to involve them in the discussion and decision-making process regarding the development of these standards. And it is thanks to this way that the standards and recommended approaches reflect consensus built among all the participating countries. The key milestone in this process was actually the delivery of the international VAT GST guidelines that set a set of principles to treat global international trade, to allocate taxing rights, but also to identify effective collection mechanisms. Since their delivery, the guidelines have been complemented by important implementation guidance that address specific needs, emerging needs, including effective collection mechanisms for VAT on online sales, including analysis on the role that digital platforms can play in the collection of VAT, but also on the impact and the growth of the sharing gig economy on VAT GST policy and administration. And it is thanks to the potential of the Global Forum on VAT to foster this inclusive dialogue and to draw on its unique expertise and experience that the OECD has developed this technical guidance and has been in a position to assist interstate jurisdictions in the effective implementation of a comprehensive VAT strategy to address those challenges. Today, we have left the stage of delivery and we are well advanced in the phase of implementation. And we have close to 100 jurisdictions that have implemented reforms based on the OECD VAT standards and guidance. And we have over 30 jurisdictions that are considering implementing those standards. And among the over 100 jurisdictions I referred to, more than half of them are developing economies. The implementation of these standards allow developing economies, but also all economies that have actually implemented them, to secure crucial VAT GST revenues and to ensure a level playing field between e-commerce and traditional businesses. And all this without stifling innovation and economic growth. Allow me to refer to the more recent example of Thailand, being a developing economy, and have put in place those standards since September 2021. And they have managed to collect in the first 28 months after the implementation of the standards, almost $489 million. While most of these reforms have been aimed at the collection of VAT and GST on online sales of services and digital products, countries all over the globe, including an important number of developing economies, are now considering further reform to ensure that VAT GST is also collected effectively on online sales of low-value imported goods based on OECD standards and guidance. It is obvious that those countries need assistance, and the OECD has put together a comprehensive capacity building program to assist notably developing economies willing to align the recommended approach, their systems with recommended approaches. And this includes a range of activities to cater for the specific needs and requirements of developing economies. And these activities include e-learning modules that are supposed to actually enhance the understanding of these recommended approaches and raise awareness, of course. And these e-learning modules are also supported by interactive workshops that are open to delegates from all interstate jurisdictions. And you can see on the slide announcement for two of the upcoming in-person and online virtual and online interactive workshop that we will organize. But it's not only about these e-learning modules and workshops, because we do understand and we do realize that there are some specific needs and some specific circumstances that we need to take into account when we try to assist developing economies with the implementation of these standards. So to further support interstate developing economies, the OECD developed regional VAT digital toolkits in partnership with the World Bank Group and regional organizations. And these toolkits provide step-by-step guidance for the design and implementation of the recommended framework for the collection of VAT on digital trade. And they are aiming exactly at taking into account the specificities at regional level and assist developing economies to make sure that the reforms that they take in place are well adapted to their own needs. These VAT digital toolkits include a toolkit for Latin America and the Caribbean region that has been developed with the support also of ATAF, a toolkit for Asia Pacific that has been developed with the support of the Inter-American Center for Tax Administration and the Inter-American Development Bank, and the toolkit for Africa that has been actually delivered earlier later in 2023. The OECD continues to work to assist developing economies with the implementation of the digital VAT GST reforms based on the recommended approaches via also a targeted technical assistance program. And today, close to 25 jurisdictions have received this targeted assistance, while there are ongoing programs providing full technical assistance to 6 other jurisdictions. And additionally to that, we have reached out to more than 180 countries through 45 global and regional workshops and events since 2020 to raise awareness around these recommended approaches and also to enhance the understanding. But as I previously said, this technical assistance is being coordinated in close cooperation with also partners that include notably the World Bank. And here it is a great honor and pleasure today to invite Mr. David O'Sullivan, Senior Economist and International Tax at World Bank, to present World Bank's perspectives on this continuing cooperation that we have, as well as to refer to various technical assistance programs and projects for countries worldwide. David, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitra. And every time I see those figures that you present in terms of revenues, it's very, very encouraging, because this work is having a very meaningful impact. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the World Bank Group. Firstly, I'd like to endorse the great points that you have made on the importance of the VAT standards for taxing cross-border digital services and e-commerce supplies. Not only can implementation of these standards raise vital public revenues, but they can also deliver a level playing field for business and reduce compliance costs. So it is important, and there's a win-win-win here if implemented. I think it's also fair to say that unlike other areas of international taxation where discussions are still ongoing, the VAT standards are not controversial. Countries agree that the taxing rights are with the country of the consumer, and countries and the business community, through the work of WP9 and the Global Forum on VAT, have been working hand in hand in an inclusive way to make sure that these standards work in practice. The World Bank has been a strong supporter of the international VAT standards for digital services and e-commerce, and have a long commitment to work with our strategic partners, such as the OECD, to assist with the implementation. In 2019, we embarked on a joint project with the OECD to develop the toolkits that you mentioned. As you say, we now have 3 toolkits in place, and these were developed with the input of the countries in the region, together with the regional organizations such as CEAT, Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and ATAF. And indeed, I was very pleased to participate at the launch of the African Toolkit at the ATAF General Meetings in November last year. The toolkits provide a comprehensive blueprint for countries to implement the standards. And there are compelling reasons for countries to take the next steps in making the political decisions, legislating for these, building the simplified systems, and engaging with stakeholders to make this a reality. This really is low-hanging fruit, and it can fund public services. The example that you gave from Thailand is illuminating in such a short period, bringing in those new revenues and revenues that would not be collected otherwise. But it's also recognizing that the digital economy is rapidly increasing in size, and these revenues will become even more significant. The bank places great value in international regional organizations working closely together to assist countries implementing international standards. And in this context, the World Bank has been working together with the OECD in providing assistance to several countries, including with Peru and Jamaica. There is a journey in respect to implementation, but we are committed to working with the countries and trusted partners to assist with this implementation. The work is, while the standards are very straightforward, they are technical and it is new ground, but there are very, very good examples to follow. And I know other speakers will talk about how they've implemented and how they've successfully implemented. And we're very happy to continue that collaboration to the benefit of countries and for their needs. I think as a final point, a lot of the work of the OECD VAT team and Working Party number 9 has gone under the radar, but it is having a really big impact. The developments of the VAT guidelines are a global public good. They enable trade, they ensure neutrality, and they guard against both double taxation and non-taxation. And we are ready and willing to work with countries and continue working with countries to ensure that they benefit from these standards, working in collaboration with our international and regional partners. Thank you, Dimitra.
Thank you very much, David, for your insights. I couldn't agree more with you that here we are talking about low-hanging fruits that developing economies can indeed adapt to their own specificities and have immediate results, as we see also happening in a number of countries that have already gone through this process. And also, thank you so much for reiterating your commitment to continue our very constructive cooperation. It is indeed to the benefit of developing economies if organizations can indeed explore synergies and work together, making the optimal use of existing resources, which sometimes are also very, very limited. So thank you very much for that. You referred to this ongoing technical assistance that the World Bank, in cooperation with us, with the OECD, is offering to Jamaica. And of course, the best placed person to talk about that is Mr. Bevon Sinclair, who is Chief Technical Advisor at Jamaica's Tax Administration, and whom I would like to welcome to our discussion today and invite him to share Jamaica's perspectives and experiences from the technical assistance that they are currently taking from World Bank and the OECD. Mr. Sinclair, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimitra, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the OECD for giving Jamaica the opportunity to highlight the work being done on VAT reform. I also want to recognize David, who is on the platform, who is spearheading the World Bank technical assistance to Jamaica. So we have been working with World Bank and the OECD Center for Tax Policy and Administration to review and reform our VAT system and legislation. The scope of the work is a repeal and rewrite of our existing VAT legislation. VAT currently accounts for 1/3 of Jamaica's total revenue collection, so it is very significant revenue source for us. The main risk in Jamaica is the erosion of our VAT tax base with the rapid increase in cross-border trade, in digital services, and low-value imported goods. Estimations suggest that e-commerce revenue in Jamaica has more than doubled over the last 5 years to reach around $669 million in 2023, and it's projected to grow annually by 12%. So we had our OECD and World Bank mission in 2023. The focus was to engage in broad stakeholder consultation and workshops to evaluate industry requirements, policy objectives, existing legislative framework, and to look at our tax collection systems and procedures. Coming out of this mission were several recommendations. The key recommendations were one, to create an effective legal basis for the right to tax inbound international online sales by implementing the place of taxation rule, and two, implement an efficient and effective collection mechanism using a simplified reporting and collection system to address B2C trade. Jamaica would also be reviewing our existing rules relating to reverse charge mechanism for imported services for the B2B trade. We are continuing in terms of our consultations, local consultations, developing concept papers, and also the policy framework. Our next step is to develop the legislation in consultation and collaboration with OECD and the World Bank. Consultation will continue with the international suppliers and the platform, which we will have to engage in terms of any rollout. We will also have to configure our tax supporting platform to facilitate a simplified filing, registration, and compliance system for the international business platform. We intend to roll out the VAT on digital trade in a phased basis. The first phase will be the taxation of the digital services and intangibles. And then we will go on to the second phase, which will see the taxation of low value imported goods. In terms of capacity building for tax administration, Jamaica has already been exposed to the VAT digital toolkit for the Caribbean and Latin American countries, and several other capacity building opportunities hosted by the OECD, World Bank, and through the knowledge sharing platform. The main challenge that we are expecting in the implementation of this regime is the pushback from consumers who are currently not paying any tax on the low value goods and the digital services that are being imported. So we have to prepare for that. We see significant opportunities in terms of the revenue increase that would arise from the taxation of the digital services and the low value goods. And we also see this as an opportunity for the leveling of the playing field between the local brick and mortar retailers and the international online suppliers. So we look forward to continue the work and the collaboration with the international agencies. And we look forward also to the revenue that will be generated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing with us these extremely valid insights in the sense that you provided with your intervention a very nice overview of both the opportunities and challenges that a country that is about to implement a regime for taxing online sales experience. Also, you provided a very nice overview in terms of sequencing the stages of the reform. So first to address the issue of digital services and then move to low value goods, given that the timeline for implementation are different. And also I would like to seize the opportunity to thank you and Jamaica in general for your active contribution in the development of the ASEAN Toolkit, and also to reiterate our interest, of course, and readiness to continue working with you in the same constructive manner. Thank you very much. I think it's also very good to continue listening to experiences from countries that are in the process of getting technical assistance from the OECD and other partners in terms of implementing reforms. With that in mind, I would like to invite Ms. Intumeleng Gositsile, who is representing Botswana as his manager and rulings and directives at Botswana's Unified Revenue Service. And Intumeleng has kindly accepted our invitation to share with us today a few insights related to ongoing process in Botswana in introducing the VAT reform directed at e-services, and also comment on the value of the technical assistance that Botswana is getting from the OECD. So with that, Intumeleng, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity. I'll just share a short update on where Botswana is regarding collection of VAT on e-commerce. And by way of background, Botswana has taken the decision to review the tax laws, which is the VAT and income tax, as well as introducing the Tax Administration Act. The objective was to align the acts to the modern forms of legislative drafting and best practice. Now, because the tax administration contains administrative provisions from both the acts, it is essential they are presented to Parliament at the same time. Hence, we are still here. Some of the new provisions in the VAT Act is the introduction of VAT on remote or electronic services. Like other countries, this is key to revenue mobilization. Now, to assist with the preparations, Botswana has requested for technical assistance from the African Tax Administration Forum in collaboration with the OECD. The technical assistance entails, among others, coming up with execution strategy for actual implementation, communication with prospective non-resident suppliers, finalization of the legislative framework, and implementing effective and efficient collection mechanisms such as simplified processes. As you know, Dimitra and colleagues, taxation of remote services is a highly technical and challenging exercise, and hence we need hand-holding. We appreciate the collaboration with the OECD for bringing on board the Business and Industry Advisory Committee, BIAC, because we are still going to need hand-holding even as we identify potential registrants. The collaboration with the OECD started in April 2023. It was inaugural meeting for the project. And the aim was for the OECD together with ATAF to share with the Botswana team best practice and to highlight the important aspects of VAT on digital trade. The collaboration also facilitated our engagement with BIAC, and we had our first meeting with BIAC in June 2023. The meeting was very successful, and we received unwavering support from the business community. So thank you very much, Carl and your team. After that meeting, we shared our draft legislation, and which we wanted the team to BIAC to review the draft and make comments. And they gave us feedback, and the issues they raised were considered, and some of them were incorporated in the draft. In August 2023, the OECD again joined us again for a 5-day engagement, which was designed specifically for the development of the electronic services regulations. And we also, during those 5 days, had a in-country benchmarking with Uganda and South Africa, and still to share experiences. And the team made very important input to the draft legislation and regulations, most of which were accepted and relevant changes were made. However, we still have the draft regulations, and we intend to share it with BIAC before the end of April, which will be followed by another engagement. The aim is for them to review and give comments as usual so that we can incorporate the comments in. It is anticipated that the Honorable Minister of Finance will present the bills before Parliament at the July 2024 sitting. It has been postponed because of like I said, it's 3 acts at a go, so it's a big work. But we are hoping that this July the minister will table the draft at Parliament. And we hope by then we've done most of the stakeholder engagements. And what are the next steps for us? We are starting, as we can see, there is still more work to do, and we still require assistance in drafting the guidelines, identifying remote services or electronic services suppliers, draft simplified processes, registration, returns, payment, system changes, and continuous consultations with key stakeholders. Are there any challenges? We are starting, it's still early stages, and I believe the challenges that other countries are facing, we will face, but luckily we have strong support behind us in the name of OECD, ATAF, and BIAC. To conclude, Dimitra, let me conclude by reiterating our sincere gratitude to the OECD, BIAC, and of course ATAF for unwavering support given to Botswana during this time. We are also thankful for countries like Kenya, South Africa, and Uganda for sharing their experiences with us. In Setswana, we say, Leka mosoba hae, so translated, continue lending a hand even in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Itumeleng, for sharing with us these updates on Botswana's digital reform. And thank you in particular also for highlighting the importance of close engagement with the business community throughout this process. This is indeed a very important element that experience suggests, but also our recommended approaches highlight the need to consult from the very early stages of the reform with the business community, given that they need time to comply, of course, and also that you need on your side the possibility and opportunity to get a better understanding of the composition of your taxpayer population. So thank you very much, Itumeleng. We are also on our side looking forward to continuing our constructive cooperation. And of course, as you said, this reform is going to be key in the context of revenue mobilization for Botswana. Thank you very much. I mentioned earlier that most of the countries that have put in place this type of digital reforms have done so for the treatment of online digital supplies of services. But what we have now seen is a trend towards also implementing reforms to collect VAT on e-commerce low-value goods, which under a traditional VAT rules remained inappropriately taxed or even untaxed in some cases. And here today we have the honor and pleasure of having Mr. Arsena Tetorazvili representing Georgia. Mr. Tetorazvili is Deputy Head of Analytical Department at Georgia Revenue Service. and he has kindly accepted our invitation to present Georgia's experiences with respect to ongoing technical assistance by the OECD that will allow Georgia to extend the reform to low-value imported goods. Arsena, the floor is yours.
Hello. Firstly, on behalf of the Georgia Revenue Service, I want to thank to the OECD for giving me the floor to share our country's experience about the reform for the collection of VAT on low-value imported goods. Georgia has studied harmonization of national legislation with European Union legislation and tackling VAT tax avoidance risk in the digital economy. At first, we have chosen to solve taxation problems in B2C transactions, where the main actors and initiators of exchange goods or services are foreign taxable persons. In Georgia, the above-mentioned process was divided into two phases. Phase 1 concentrated on VAT on digital services, and with the assistance of the OECD, it is already implemented. Based on provided input and gained experience, we have now started a project to improve compliance in the taxation of imported low-value goods. The second phase of reform of the VAT collection regime in the digital economy consists of imported low-value goods. According to the Georgian tax code, imported of low-value goods is exempted from VAT. Due to this regime, imported goods by first post increased dramatically. The main source of this increase is low-value goods. And of course, it has a negative impacts on tax compliance levels, as it means decreased VAT revenues, unfair competitive pressures on domestic retailers, and relocation of domestic suppliers to an offshore jurisdictions. In addition, of course, there is custom clearance risks. At the stages of these reforms, we have identified potential key stakeholders and have estimated their power and interest. Effective stakeholder management is crucial factors of success to every project. And so we reviewed existing VAT collection models on low-value imports, and that are considered the best practice in the modern world. And based on our research analysis, we have decided to implement in Georgia vendor intermediary collection model. Planned action also include abolition of revising the exemption threshold, simplifying the reporting and collection mechanisms, and using incentives to encourage compliance. For example, we are considering VAT exemptions on postal pass transportation and insurance costs. Also, simplifying the custom procedures or if low-value goods are purchased from foreign taxable intermediaries. It means significant benefits for each stakeholders, for the e-commerce platforms, its increase of its attractiveness, for the purchasers, reduce cost and customs clearance times. For intermediaries, increase competitiveness, and of course, for us, an improved tax compliance levels, which is the main goals of our organization. At this stage, we take considerations that we have considerations two options: taxation of the e-commerce platforms vendors or the shipping forwarders. Both options have the advantages and disadvantages. We have started international practice, have consulted with key stakeholders, and communicated and consulted with business at OECD. Ahead of our reforms, there are some challenges. There is the complexity of the projects, involvement large numbers of stakeholders, including foreign ones, and changeable business models and supply chain arrangements. Thus, international cooperations, assistance, and sharing the experience are key factors of success. To address the above-mentioned challenges, we are actively using the technical assistance programs with the OECD, receiving expert advice and supporting materials. Georgia has also participated in the last Working Part 9 meeting in May and November 2023. This working party is a good opportunity to share different countries' experience and gain knowledge about the modern tendency of VAT taxation. Finally, the involvement of foreign tax stakeholders, especially large companies, in the project requires further international support. So we are planning to continue using the OECD platforms to communicate and consulting with the business. And finally, I want to set the end to thanks OECD, their supports, and also assistance is crucial to implement it and successfully implement these ongoing projects, and also success and also the results of previous past when was also due to great support and technical assistance of OECD.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arsena, for sharing Georgia's experiences with the technical assistance that they get from the OECD, and also for providing this high-level overview of your journey towards implementing a reform on low-value imports. I think it was of particular interest, your reference to all the measures that you put in place to simplify compliance and to actually provide incentives to taxpayers to comply with the reform, which is of course of crucial importance in terms of facilitating and enhancing compliance. But that makes me think actually that it is important to simplify compliance for those actors that would like to comply, but of course experience suggests that there is also a part of taxpayers that may not be willing to comply despite every effort made by the tax administrations to offer simplification. And that actually brings us to the discussion of an ongoing work strand that we have actually recently launched at the OECD, which is how we can enhance the enforcement capacity of tax authorities to collect VAT, to tackle actually non-compliance and fraud in digital trade. As I said, so far, the work has focused on how we can facilitate compliance for those compliant actors, but it is important that, of course, we also make sure that we tackle non-compliance and VAT fraud, not because this translates into revenue losses, but because it has a very negative impact on compliant actors, on compliant businesses, and at the end of the day, it can have a detrimental impact on the overall tax morale among tax payers. So at the OECD, we have recently launched the work on this area. We have put together a focus group on VAT enforcement. The objective of this group is to bring together subject matter experts from interested jurisdictions to exchange expertise and knowledge, non-taxpayer specific information to actually identify trends, risk patterns, to analyze those risk patterns. We heard earlier our Georgian delegate referring to potential issues with drop shipping arrangements that may also trigger some risks. And the idea is indeed to analyze these risk patterns, to identify appropriate mechanisms to tackle these risks, but also in general to facilitate the use of existing legal basis for the international administrative cooperation to support VAT and GST compliance risk management. This is an ongoing work, but it is a very important part to complement all the previous guidance that we have developed. In the same context of trying to assist jurisdictions with their enforcement capacity in the area of VAT, there is a recent program in the context of Tax Inspector Without Borders. This is actually an UNDP OECD joint initiative. The idea here is to assist countries that have already put in place a regime to levy VAT on digital trade to get support from experienced experts from other jurisdictions on specific audit cases. So here, this initiative is there to offer hands-on assistance in the context of specific audit cases, and therefore support interested jurisdictions to tackle VAT non-compliance or fraud typically by non-resident sellers in the context of digital trade. So you can see on the slide also the contacts of the Secretariat in charge for this initiative in case, of course, your country is interested. So with that, I think it's the right moment to invite Ms. Leslie O'Connell, Executive Revenue Planning at the South African Revenue Service, to share South Africa's experiences in the area of VAT enforcement. South Africa has been a pioneer country in African continent in terms of implementing VAT reform on electronic services back in 2014. So in terms of maturity, they are already well advanced in the process. So I think it's the right moment to invite also South Africa's perspective on the importance of VAT enforcement in this area and potential interlinks and relation with a general VAT policy. So Leslie, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dimitra. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. Firstly, a very big thank you to you and your wonderful team for extending the invitation to South Africa to allow us to give us just an insight into what our experience has been with regard to the enforcement area of non-resident suppliers. As Dimitra has indicated, South Africa introduced a very limited scope, a form of taxation of e-commerce. In 2014, that scope was broadened significantly in 2019 to include both B2B and B2C transactions. At the time, obviously, we were one of the first countries to go as broad to include B2B and B2C. And that directly impacted on the compliance levels of the non-residents for the simple reason that we were very different from the majority of the countries that had implemented. And as a result of that, our enforcement capability and the need for the enforcement therefore increased drastically. It's important to have enforcement action because you want to ensure that there's parity between local suppliers and your foreign suppliers with regard to the supplies that they are making. You definitely don't want to be putting foreign suppliers on a better footing because they haven't charged the VAT to your local customers. So with regard to what did we do, and exactly as Dimitra was speaking earlier about the various work streams on enforcement, we did what we call follow the money approach, which is we collected data from the central bank, we analyzed it, we identified those non-compliant taxpayers, and we engaged with them. As I indicated previously, the majority were not aware that they had an obligation to register, and therefore our approach was therefore more of a welcoming one and an assistance to them to be able to ensure that they become compliant in our jurisdiction. What we also did with regard to the payments data or the money information that we had, we used that to be able to track compliance of these non-residents. We could see who had outstanding returns, who had submitted nil returns, while at the same time seeing that they had actually received payment from South African customers. And again, we have engaged where necessary. Most importantly, we've invoked the mutual assistance in taxation matters, and we requested information from 2 jurisdictions. And what we found from that process was it was also very good to actually deal directly first with those entities that we were requesting the information from. What we had learned from that is that they were very happy to assist us, but because of the GDPR regulations in the EU, they were very uncomfortable and could not actually share the information. And that's why this mutual assistance agreement is really, really of such valuable importance, because it then allowed us to be able to engage with the tax administrations and get the necessary information. What we found from that is that there was no need to get all the information, but to only request the top 20% of the taxpayers, because they generally contribute 80% of the revenue with regard to these platforms. So that was definitely something that we learned along the way. Another thing that we learned is with regard to enforcement action, it's better to start sooner rather than later. We waited for approximately 5 to 6 years before we actually started on the enforcement road, and we do think that it should have been done a lot sooner. Once you start with your enforcement action, we have a program called the Voluntary Disclosure Program. And as a result of that, it allowed and encouraged non-residents to go through the Voluntary Disclosure Program to regularize their tax affairs. the importance of taxpayer education is also very important. But what we've also realized is that what enforcement action does is that it impacts on the development of tax policy. Because what we can see from the results of the enforcement is that we have now, our minister has recently announced that we will be changing from a B2B, B2C regime to a purely B2C regime. I must mention the engagement that we've had with BIAC with regard to other areas that we are looking at solely as a result of the work of the OECD, and a great thanks to BIAC for always being so willing and helpful to assist us in this regard. What we've also realized is that platforms are extremely important with regard to the collection of VAT, and that when you are specifically sitting with a limitation in audit resources, that it would be much better to be able to collect your VAT from platforms as opposed to going to all the suppliers that are registered on the platforms. That obviously is a much more difficult area to do as opposed to just engaging with the platform. So that in a nutshell has been South Africa's experience. And once again, a very big thank you to the OECD for allowing us to give us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie, for sharing these insights. As I previously mentioned, you are well advanced in this journey of the reform. So it is very important to see what is the role of enforcement once you have put in place a simplified regime. And thank you also for highlighting the potential of follow the money strategies as a complementary tool in the context of building a robust VAT management strategy. It is not by coincidence that also ongoing work at the OECD is indeed focusing on the potential of follow the money strategies, but very importantly, as you also highlighted, on the potential of enhanced exchange of information and administrative cooperation in terms of assisting interested jurisdictions to tackle VAT fraud and non-compliance. And what experience suggests is that despite the fact that the legal instruments are there, there is apparently a lack of awareness on the potential of these instruments, of these legal instruments, and hence a key focus of ongoing work on enhancing awareness and on actually making tax officials all over the globe understand what are the opportunities by leveraging on this instrument. So thank you very much for this. And with this intervention, we can now open the floor for some interventions from the floor or some questions. And so please use the raise the hand feature of Zoom to ask for the floor. So I have on my list first Karl-Heinz Heidel.
Yes, thanks, Dimitra. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, thank you very much to the OECD for organizing a VAT session in the Tax and Development Day, which, as we heard before, is very, very important since we all know that VAT plays an important role in the overall revenue income of governments, and also business being a VAT GST collector is the closest partner to the governments here to bring the money home. Just briefly, as an introduction, my name is Karl-Heinz Heidel. I'm a global VAT GST practitioner. I'm also chairing the VAT GST work of BIAC. And it has been mentioned before from a couple of colleagues how greatly we're working together with the OECD, the World Bank, ATAF, and other organizations in order to actually share best practices and make things work in practice. I just wanted to make sure make a couple of quick remarks to actually ensure again why it is so important to have these dialogues. First of all, as we all know, through technology and globalization, these days we are only one click away. Whether we are far away, distance-wise, commerce-wise, we are only one click away. And that's so important here. And that has very important impacts for VAT revenues, but also for business as well to have a level playing field, as Dimitra and other colleagues mentioned before. Therefore, we really highly welcome the work done by the OECD on the international VAT guidelines and also the follow-up work on the toolkits. And we have been actively involved supporting this from the business side with sharing experiences. For us, from business, it's very, very important. This work is great, but it's important that it is implemented in a consistent, internationally consistent and simple way
Thank you very much, Karl-Heinz. And indeed, in the context of this inclusive way and approach that we have adopted for the purpose of developing the work, we have been, as you know, since the very early days in close cooperation with the business community, and we value very much business feedback in a timely manner in the development of the work, given the important role of businesses in terms of collecting the tax, the VAT. And we really value this engagement, and we are committed to continue doing so. And therefore, we are always ready to facilitate direct communication between interstate countries and the business community to ensure that this input from the business feed in a timely manner ongoing reform processes. Thank you very much, Karl-Heinz. I think with that, we are arriving at the end of this session, and which actually discussed the opportunities of technical assistance offered by the OECD and its partner organizations. And we heard from countries on their experiences with implementing these reforms. We do acknowledge that there are challenges, significant opportunities, however, that may outweigh challenges most of the times. But all this work would not have been possible without the support of our donors, and we would like to seize the opportunity to express our deepest gratitude to the donors for their generosity and continuing support. It is actually our commitment to leverage on opportunities to elaborate on synergies in the context of ensuring optimal and responsible use of available resources, always, of course, for the benefit of developing economies. With that, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers. I would like to thank you for having joined this session today. The OECD is dedicated to continue supporting developing economies in addressing emerging challenges from the evolving digital economy, ensuring ongoing assistance and collaboration, and making sure that our recommended solutions remain relevant in an ever-evolving digital landscape. So please, we will continue doing so in an inclusive manner. So stay tuned and also stay involved in this process. And please do not hesitate to reach out to us for any question you may have or assistance that you may require. With that, a big thank you. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.